A very active stretch of severe weather is coming to densely populated areas of the United States through this weekend and even next week as a new ring of fire pattern is setting up in the west, and it's going to bring all hazards of severe weather for the next few days, including tornadoes, damaging winds, and very large hail. I'm going to break down everything that you need to know so that you can stay safe and stay weather aware as you roll through your weekend and into early next week. So let's get right into the forecast. Hopping right into our day one categorical outlook, this is for Saturday. We're not expecting a ton of severe weather, but definitely the threat for some wind damage where really all the way throughout even the Great Basin, back through central Montana, central South Dakota, and even into the northern Midwest, we are expecting some level of risk for severe weather this evening. These are going to be more isolated occurrences where we could have some wind damage, maybe a little bit of hail as well. Not anything that I'm super concerned about in terms of a tornado threat or anything. Same deal going on back in southern Arizona where we've had all sorts of random spurts of stronger thunderstorms capable of producing gusty winds and small hail down there as well over the last week or so. We do have a 2% tornado risk in place for tonight, back towards the Twin Cities, even back up close to Duluth and including a lot of parts of western Wisconsin. I'm not terribly worried about that, but we could definitely see an isolated tornado or two as we are expecting the possibility for a couple supercells to fire off in this environment this evening. Now, again, the probability of that happening is relatively low, but if any supercells can fire off and sustain themselves, the environment isn't terribly unfavorable for a couple of tornadoes or some larger hail in there as well. Tonight's wind risk is going to include a large portion of the northern United States, all the way again from back towards the Great Basin, back through the northern plains, and then even towards the northern Midwest. We also still have that 5% risk in place down in Arizona as well. But you'll notice those SIG 1 and those yellow areas, that's those hatched areas and yellow areas. Those are going to be an intensity 1 and a 15% risk for wind damage, where we could see some stronger gusty winds on the order of maybe 70 miles per hour. And there's a little bit higher confidence in central Montana and central South Dakota for a couple of those stronger wind gusts with some of the storms that will fire off later this afternoon. Looking at our hail risk, it is going to echo what I said a moment ago, where back into the northern Midwest, we are expecting the risk for a couple of supercells to fire off. If any of them do, they would pose that risk for that large to very large hail. And that's why we only have a 5% risk in place, but we do have a SIG 1 on top of it. So it's unlikely that we really get any supercells that take advantage of this environment. But if we do, we could definitely be looking at a couple of very large hailstones, maybe up to around baseball-sized hail. Sunday's tornado threat is going to include a 2% that's going to include areas like Green Bay and Madison and Milwaukee in Wisconsin. But in general, I'm not expecting a ton of threat for tornadoes, but a couple spin-up tornadoes definitely possible. I'm much more looking at a windbag event for Sunday night. Wind is going to be our primary threat for tomorrow. Like I said, we do have a large 5% risk all the way from back through Ohio and then even through the Dakotas and Nebraska a little bit in there, even clipping a part of northern Missouri and northern Kentucky. So lots of areas included with at least some risk for damaging winds tomorrow. But you'll notice that main area of concern is going to be concentrated back towards the Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin tri-state region. So we have that SIG 1 risk in place there where we have a higher confidence and a couple of stronger wind gusts on the order of maybe 70 miles per hour. And then we also have that 15% risk that you're seeing there in yellow, where there is a 15% risk for damaging wind. Now, there is some risk for hail, but I'm not terribly concerned about it. We do have a 15% risk for some damaging hailstones, mostly just in Wisconsin. But again, we're only going to be seeing a handful of discrete storms, if any, and that's why we only have a small 2% tornado risk in place for tomorrow as well. I also think our mid-level lapse rates and our moisture as forecast in the hail growth zone forecasted by recent model guidance is not incredibly impressive. So I'm not terribly worried about a major hail threat tomorrow. We definitely could see a handful of instances of that small to medium sized hail that could deal some damage. Now, Monday's the most concerning day for me as of right this minute. We already have that 2 out of 5 slight risk, even on the day 3 outlook. And you're going to see in a second those probabilities decently high for a day 3 outlook as well. But this is going to include areas like the Ohio Valley and even back into the Midwest. And I'm expecting a more robust severe weather event on Monday for sure, where we could be looking at all hazards, including the risk for multiple tornadoes and perhaps a strong tornado. So more of those details are going to get resolved over time. We're going to have another forecast video coming out on Monday morning to talk about that in greater detail, but definitely worried about Monday. On the probabilistic outlook, you can see that 30% risk in red has already been put in place back for Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. So definitely a concern for severe weather. We do have that 5% risk back into the Central Plains as well. Areas like the Nebraska Panhandle, Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, even southwestern South Dakota. So definitely something to pay attention to there, but the main concern is going to be back towards the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. I'm also watching Tuesday in very populated regions of the United States where I'm expecting a little bit more of a windbag scenario. So that's going to include areas in the mid-Atlantic down through the Carolinas, really populated areas out there in North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, DC, and Jersey, even towards Philly. So a lot of populated areas out there that will be impacted on Tuesday by severe weather. The Storm Prediction Center has already issued a 15% risk for that severe weather. And in fact, even yesterday on the day 5 outlook, they had a 15% risk in place for the exact same region. So definitely confident that there's going to be some sort of severe weather there on Tuesday. And again, I'm expecting it to be more of a wind risk than anything else. Jumping right into the timing of our severe weather, the first thing that you're going to notice is that a lot of storms by 7 p.m. will be firing off back into Montana and South Dakota. That's why those slight risks have been introduced, as we are expecting to get some storms in that environment that could be producing some hail and gusty winds. You'll also notice that back towards Wisconsin and the Twin Cities, we're not really seeing any storms fire off, and that trend does continue even through the evening hours by midnight here. So this is Sunday at 12 a.m. technically. What we're seeing here is no storms firing off and taking advantage of that environment. I don't think that storms will really be able to break through the cap, but if we do get a stray supercell that does break through the cap, it will pose the risk for large hail and perhaps a tornado for Saturday night, which is tonight. As we keep plowing forward, what you're going to notice is that we get a little bit of an MCS that's going to roll through Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and eventually towards northern Illinois. So that's a cluster of thunderstorms that will be posing a wind risk. It's going to eventually clear up by around 9 a.m. on Sunday, and that's going to help set up the environment for Sunday's severe weather. By 6 p.m., we're already seeing discrete supercells firing off in central Minnesota, and those are going to continue to track down towards Wisconsin. Now, I do think that tornado risk might expand just a little bit, where we only have a 2% in eastern Wisconsin right now. I think that risk might expand just a little bit and maybe become a 5% risk, at least in some parts, but we are expecting those supercells to continue to track down into Wisconsin here through Minnesota. And any of those storms could pose the risk for a little bit of hail and especially damaging winds as they continue to propagate down towards the southeast. And as we go into the overnight hours on Sunday, you're going to see more storms starting to fire off back in Michigan and Indiana. That's going to help set up the environment for Monday, and I'm going to talk about Monday in just a little bit, as this at 6 a.m. here on Monday is as far as the 12Z HER is going to take us. But you will see those storms continuing to push on through areas that will have that severe weather on Monday night, which is why we have to watch it closely. And that's also why there's still a lot of uncertainty. The main thing that's driving our severe weather is going to be another pretty stereotypical ring of fire style of pattern, where we have this high pressure setup back towards Denver, and that's going to create this big old ridge that's bringing that northwesterly flow through the northern Midwest and northern plains and even back towards the Ohio Valley. So you're going to notice that is going to be a consistent trend here over the next few days, all the way through Monday, and perhaps even a little bit later on in the forecast as well. And I'm even going to show you here a couple of other models, the refs in agreement here, the NAM in agreement, also the RAP, even the GFS and the Euro are in agreement here on that ridge persisting here. And that is going to provide a trough back towards the East Coast as well, which could help aid some severe weather in that neck of the woods as we go later on into the week. Over time here, we can watch that mid-level jet really start to ramp up and propagate itself down towards the Ohio Valley. You're going to see here by Sunday, we're looking at a pretty potent mid-level jet. This is at 500 millibars, so a lot of divergence is expected in this area, and that's definitely going to aid in that severe weather threat for Sunday. And all of those winds are just going to continue making their way on down, even back towards the mid-Atlantic eventually as we go towards Monday, which is going to help with that severe weather as well, especially as that cold front eventually is going to be moving on back through areas like the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas. As we look at our mixed layer cape, it is going to be providing the main reason why I'm not terribly worried about tonight. Is you're going to see there isn't quite enough instability in the mixed layer to break through that temperature inversion and that capping inversion at the top of the PBL that will be in place. Essentially, storms won't be able to break through that cap and grow explosively. And so we don't have enough instability to do that out in Wisconsin. Therefore, it's unlikely that we see a random storm pop up. But if we do, the environment will be decently favorable for you to get a couple of larger hailstones or perhaps a tornado, especially out in Wisconsin. That's not going to be as much of an issue as we roll forward in time into Sunday. You're going to see here by the evening hours on Sunday, tons of instability in our main corridor of concern. In fact, even tons of instability back in northeastern Iowa and northern Illinois. So could still see some stronger storms in those areas as well that continue to fire off and try to take advantage of that environment on Sunday. One of the main things that's going to limit our tornado threat for Sunday night is going to be our LCL heights. You're going to see they're actually decently favorable Saturday night. And again, the entire environment's decently favorable for a couple of tornadoes or large hailstones Saturday night, which is tonight. But I just don't think we're going to get any storms take advantage of that environment. But as we go into Sunday night, you're going to notice these LCL heights are a lot higher, on the order of well over 1,000, even in some areas upwards of 2,000 or even 3,000. So we're going to have a tough time getting these storms surface based enough to pose a significant threat for tornadoes. But definitely could still be looking at a pretty big wind event on Sunday. But again, this is the main concern for me as why we're not looking at a lot of tornado threat on Sunday night and why we're looking at more of a wind threat. Those LCL heights are just too high. One thing that we will have both tonight and tomorrow night is sufficient shear. You're going to notice plenty of shear in these areas, with shear vectors coming down to the southeast, decently favorable given the setup that we are in for tonight. But again, not expecting any storms to be able to take advantage of that environment. But as we go into Sunday night, not quite as much shear, but still going to have corridors where there's going to be plenty of shear. And as we go into the evening hours, even into the overnight hours, those shear values are going to uptick a little bit. So we definitely could be looking at more of a nocturnal threat for tornadoes developing on Sunday night as well. So there is still a lot of layers to this for Sunday night's forecast. Our storm relative helicity is going to provide another example of how the environment is pretty favorable out here this evening out in Minnesota, but we're just not going to be seeing any storms able to take advantage of that environment. You're going to see that there's a lot of spin available for an updraft to ingest even into the overnight hours on Sunday. I just don't think we're going to actually get any storms that take advantage of that environment at all. But as we go forward in time, take a look at what happens on Sunday night. There really isn't quite as much storm relative helicity available in the environment, and that's really the main reason that we're not looking at a major tornado risk for Sunday night. It's more of a wind and hail threat. But out in eastern Wisconsin, there definitely is going to be some corridor there where we could definitely see a tornado or two. And it wouldn't blow my mind to see a spin up tornado somewhere else prior to this, but in general, I'm not really expecting much of a tornado threat at all on Sunday night because of the lack of spin available for updrafts to ingest. I did still want to point out that as we go later on into the evening, any storms that might persist into the overnight hours still could pose that risk for a tornado and perhaps an increased risk for a random tornado, because those storm relative helicity values will definitely be upticking by a significant amount as we go into the overnight hours. Now, this is at 3 a.m. I don't think we're going to have any storms persisting at 3 a.m. capable of producing tornadoes, but we definitely could see a couple of them maybe by midnight to 1 a.m. Now, to bring all of this together, I did want to show the significant tornado parameter. And you guys know I don't love to show this because I don't think it's super indicative of things. You need to do more analysis than just looking at the SIGTOR to get a good picture of what's going on. But you're going to notice that these conditions are decently favorable this evening. This is 9 p.m. on Saturday. Again, I just don't think we're going to have any storms that really take advantage of that environment at all. And the reason I also wanted to show the significant tornado parameter is because as we roll into Sunday evening, you're going to notice really not a lot of anything showing up on the map at all. So we are going to have a discrete supercell type of mode and eventually towards clustering of storms, but the conditions in the environment just really aren't going to be that favorable. But you'll notice some of those values start to show up a little bit around midnight, even like 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. really Sunday night. So we still could see a little bit of a later risk for a couple nocturnal tornadoes, which is why I wanted to show this and really hammer that point home, because those can be really dangerous when folks are sleeping. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of that. And that should get you through your weekend, but I did want to reiterate that I think Monday is going to be a pretty big severe weather day. So make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so that you know when we drop that forecast video Monday morning, and you know when we go live covering severe weather. Monday is going to be our last day of coverage for a little bit, because I am going to be traveling to Scotland for a quick vacation and then moving into my new apartment so I can start my thesis down at Mississippi State University. So we will be missing in action for about a week, but around August 6th or so, we will be back in full force covering severe weather and all weather for everything that you need to know about the weather as we go forward for the foreseeable future. There won't really be any more interruptions after that. So make sure that you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so that you know what's coming and you can stay up to date with everything that we're doing here at WillBrattonWx. Thank you for trusting us as your source for reliable weather information, and we'll see you soon. Stay safe out there.